Welcome to the Dribble Podcast, your weekly fix of all things Perth Wildcats and Aussie basketball, presented by PerthNow.
G'day everyone and welcome to the Dribble Podcast, the place where we're a little bit like the Perth Wildcats in that when some people think we might be losing our touch a little, we bounce back even stronger than ever. My name's Chris Robinson from the Western PerthNow. The man alongside me furiously refreshing his Twitter feed to see if his prediction of an import change comes true. Perth Wildcats, great. Greg, hi. How you doing, Greg?
Oh, mate. Well, I'm wondering how long it took you to write that introduction. That was a little bit snazzy. Like usually it's just stock standard, but no, I like where we're at. It's set a great tone for the show.
Just a bit of pep off the top.
Exactly. And we
stayed up all night to write that one.
Yeah, a little bit of elevator talk, and I was close. I messaged you after the Sunday game, and I said my crystal ball. We discussed the timing of this show. I said let's give it a day because I reckon there's some movement. Unfortunately, not. So if it happens,
maybe by the time we put this to air later this afternoon,
I'll call all the other clubs and say, hey, make me look good. So, there is. It's at that point. It's the official mark of the halfway point of the season.
And when your imports are did DMPs, not play coaches' decisions like Keith Benson did for South East Melbourne,
interesting
there may
times.
Well be changes coming. We'll get to that one a little bit later.
Yep.
Talk to me about the Cats, Greg, because it was a terrific's an understatement for the weekend they had. It was pretty much a perfect weekend.
Yeah, I think
to make that first half statement in particular against Sydney, and then to back it up. Come from behind in the second half. They were down 7 or 8 early in that third quarter against the Phoenix.
Yeah, and in context, in the lead up, and obviously there was a lot of doubters, and you sort of you put it to the side. And I think even Trev spoke about it after South East Melbourne sort of game. Sort of said that's the expectation. You lose a couple of games that everyone writes them off, and it's I do find it comical at times. I've now being retired, I'll actually pipe in a little bit. I guess I don't know if you're adding fuel to the fire, but to write back and sort of even part of these sort of cat chats and messages and all that, and saw a fan ask how much they were going to get annihilated by Sydney for, and it's that stage where. And we spoke about it at the last show that the Wildcats, every time you lose, it's sort of an expectation they're going to win every single game and it's going to be an unblemished record, which isn't going to be the case. But to have your doubters, and then they came on, I thought they played. If there was the perfect game, they only scored 26 points in the second half, but to set the tone from the get-go, and I was actually a bit nervous. I was watching the game and I thought, they're playing really well, and the game was really close, and then obviously to erupt for 40 points in the second half and second quarter, and I think. What you saw was when the game was in the balance. I think there was I think both games you obviously saw 3 pivotal guys, Nick Kay, Tariko White and Bryce Cotton, really take the stranglehold in the game. And I think more so, I think Nick had an unbelievable weekend, averaged a double-double, shot the ball efficiently and played with amazing energy. And I think even in the first quarter against Sydney, just came up with a couple of loose balls and those extra possessions. And he was sensational, and I think that's your 3-gun guys. And across the league, you're seeing that. You're seeing that with Cairns, with Newble, Machado and Oliver. 3 consistent guys, and when you're seeing that, that's what's been reliant. I think Nick, going back to that, I think there's no doubt. I thought he looked a little bit tired in the just from the World Cup campaign, for him to respond in the manner he did.
Probably fair enough,
Yeah, and he was sensational. And then you look at both those games, obviously Tariko on South East Melbourne erupted in the fourth, and Bryce, I think, when the game was on the line, went nuts against Sydney. So and did well in the third as well, and against South East. So you saw that, but I think what you can't underestimate was the role that Clint Steindl played, and I think
very much so.
His intent on Friday to come in just guns blazing, and even some of those shots that he shot. Rimmed out, they were great looks, and as a shooter like that, he came in and it just stretched the floor. And I think then again that same confidence, and I think you need that. You need a pinch hitter, because if Tariko, Nick and Bryce, they do what they do, but if one goes off and doesn't have the game that's expected or relied upon, if Clint can provide that, because I think that's what they were lacking in those games, that's huge, and I think he was absolutely sensational this weekend.
Yeah, I was saying to someone after the game on Friday night, you saw probably almost a season's worth of aggression from Clint in terms of his on-court charisma. He's normally quite reserved, but he was giving it, the three fingers as he was running back down the floor, and he was quite aggressive in that mindset. I wanted to ask about a guy like that. It's such a tough role. We've talked about this in previous years on the pod. It's such a tough role to be just that spot-up shooter as your main job, to come off the bench and fire away. He's looking confident. He gets his feet set really well. He's really balanced, running off those screens. I wanted to ask about the type of personality that he might have as far as teammates go. Are you guys just constantly trying to build him up confidence, hey, fire away, or does he just know that he has that green light? How important is that sort of headspace for a guy like that?
In terms of, I played with shooters throughout my career, and I would say, and it's not a bad thing, I think he has that sort of mindset of a bit of arrogance in a healthy way, and what I'm saying that is, obviously, I think the very first season that he came, he came in late after Matty's retirement, and he shot and he wasn't shooting well, but you could sort of see it. But from that point, like the next season, every time he even had a bad game, he just still had that utmost confidence in his abilities, and which you, as a shooter, you need to have. And I've seen that, say, with guys like, say, Drew Williamson and Everard Bartlett, when you're regarded as like a shooter, just like when the Wildcats are expected to win every game, it's like every single shot you shoot needs to go in. And it's that sort of like that. That's
why it's such a hard role,
and
right?
that's that, it's like, and you hear it, like those guys miss a shot, and just like
there's
everyone else,
and
then it might be a tough shot, or if they don't shoot it and they drive it, people will like get upset, and so it's sort of like that really tough label to have. But Clint, obviously, these last 2 years has flourished with it, and I thought, one, I'm really impressed with his off the ball movement. Like, he just goes with complete aggressiveness and energy. So not only is he at the point where he's shooting extremely well in the last 5 games, I think he's over 50%, but his demeanour and the way he's trying to get the ball is only going to get other guys open, because it's just so aggressive coming off screens and doing that. So I think that's obviously huge. And he spoke about it after the game against South East Melbourne. He can't allow the game to come to him, and that is true. Like, for him, like other shooters, they just hit that open one and just rely on it, but he actually comes with that mindset. The Wildcats' offense is so, it revolves around Bryce and Tariko, and you get those, and then people pinch hit and you get your odd shot and you do that. And Nick obviously, gets that. Whereas Clint is taking that upon himself to say, hey, get me looks. And that's for a guy like that now who really plays on confidence, but it doesn't deter him, because he didn't shoot well at the start of the season, but to see him actually compound that and really come out aggressive and really flourish is quite exciting for that team. And I think that obviously shows why they went 2-0.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that press conference comment. It's probably just about my favourite Wildcats press conference performer, Clint. He speaks really honestly, puts real thought into what he says, and that was a great call when he was talking about Bryce Cotton sort of feeling his way into the game. He said, I don't have that luxury, because if I go out there and I don't take a shot for 3 minutes, I'm probably getting yanked. So he needs to be aggressive all the time. The Friday night win over Sydney, I wrote a little bit about the Wildcats sort of feasting in the mid-range, so trying to take Andrew Bogut's strength away from him a little bit. Obviously such a great paint protector, rim protector, a guy you just don't want to meet at the rim. So what's normally considered a high percentage shot, when you get to the rim you might get fouled, or you can try and finish over a bigger guy. Bogut has the capacity to alter shots and block shots. So what we saw a lot of on Friday night was particularly Bryce in the mid-range, either pulling up from right on the edge of the paint, or just those nice little runners or teardrops that he's so good at. What were your thoughts? Was that an obvious thing to you watching? And do you think there's a high risk, high reward element, given that the mid-range is analytically not the way to go, but they did it so very well on Friday night? That
would have been a scouting prowess. Well, that's what they would have definitely targeted. That's what they did last year. And we saw a bit of it from Cairns on Sunday against Sydney as well. And they would have, I think they target. This is the thing. I think what was afforded the luxury on both against Cairns and Sydney and Perth on Friday was Sydney didn't apply scoreboard pressure, so they were missing a lot of shots. Like even Casper Ware wasn't shooting well, and so teams then aren't reluctant to shoot that mid-range game when you've got that 10 to 12 buffer and they just keep on rolling. And Sydney, their offense sort of was a bit stagnant. And so, that's where I think, that Xavier Cooks is actually going to help him out extremely well, because then they can bring, him out. Bogut, when he comes off, they can play that more of an agile game. But it's definitely going to be a tactic that teams implement and obviously go with that. And I think obviously they were rolling. And then once you start getting scored on at will and confidence is high, like that's what's Perth went with 40, is that they in the second is that confidence was good rolling, they could stay hitting those shots, guys were starting to shoot threes and it opened up everything, and you start second guessing yourself. So and that's when I look at it, like, don't get me wrong, I still think Sydney and that's it's funny, I thought they would rebound on Sunday. I was surprised. I was actually watching the game with Cameron Tovey, and he sort of was like, he was talking about how Cairns is his favourite team in the league. Okay. Just the way they play. And he said, I said Cairns will win this game. I was like, no chance. Like, they'll bounce back. But I was surprised that Sydney didn't bounce back just because of the veteran leadership. But I think, bringing in Kev and still contrasting styles. But that's the beautiful thing about basketball. They had to lose games. And I think Will Weaver said it really well in his press conference. Like, there's a good time, I think, on SEN on Saturday talking about they'll take a lot more, they'll learn a lot more from that loss than if they had won in a way, because it was a good time. And, but then to lose on Sunday was quite surprising. And I thought the way, the effort thing was sort of what I saw in both games. So, I think, and this is taken away, I think Wildcats take a lot of confidence now going in a playoff series where you've got to play 5 games. They match up really, really well. And that's what teams forget, like from a regular season standpoint and all that. We were at that point where, when we played teams, like especially like last year, or you'd look at matchups, and even in my career, there was a few times like I was like, I hope we don't play Adelaide first round, or, because I just think the matchup wise, they were a bit different. Like they're a bit faster and like to run the game. They junk it up on defense. And then, you'd play games. I remember like the year we played Cairns and they were second and we were third and we bundled them out. Like we were like, we're rolling.
Bring it on.
Yeah, because we literally we could target Nate every single possession. We know we run a lot of pick and rolls heavy. We'll just keep going at him and he's a focal piece, and it happened. Like we target him as a weakness. And I think that's what, when you look at both Sydney and Melbourne, you're looking at it and going, they would go, well, we're going to look at a lot of pick and rolls at Sean Long and Bogut, who are focal pieces, and can they nullify those pick and rolls? And at the moment, they're not. Griffin put on 34 on Long, so defensively that's where I think the Wildcats go, sweet. And then you look at the teams that they may have struggled against, is because you got agile bigs, against Adelaide and both Cairns, who they generally don't switch. They're showing them a bit more, or they're not playing that mush defense that those clubs are. So I think they would take a lot of confidence going, if we play these teams in a 3-5 game series, we've been there, we've won on the road, everything sort of changes from officiating to how players play in playoffs. So, they'll take a lot of confidence from that.
Yeah, love to see a Kings Wildcat series. Haven't seen one of those in the playoffs since Sean Redditch and Mark Worthington were going at each other back in the late years of last decade. One guy did play for both of those teams, Cam Tovey. How is Cam Tovey? Give our listeners an update on former Wildcat Cam Tovey.
It was pretty funny, and obviously, give you a little bit of scope. He's obviously he's a director of our charity. He's a smart guy, right? He's an absolute genius. I mean, that was part of the reason why he retired, and obviously his body was sort of deteriorating too, but he was working a crazy job, and so he's a CA, and so he does really well. So he was on the board, and I guess when you retire as well, you sort of it was like, in a way it was good. I just sort of said, hey, you want to catch a game? And we were like, let's grab a beer. And it was sort of, and then Robbo came around later, and it's sort of, as we got down, you're like, we can actually enjoy this, and you don't really have that opportunity, and it's really cool. It was good. We're actually he's I guess what most athletes do, they miss something once you get done playing physically, and so he's in training to complete a ultramarathon in February or March.
Wow.
So he's doing that, and he's always been that case. And we just launched on our gala dinner a suicide prevention ride, which is 846 k's through the Kimberley, and so both Robbo and Tovey are going to do that. So
terrific.
It's a good thing that you can sort of hang on to as well. But Tovey's doing really well.
Excellent. I wanted a quick word from you on O-boards. This is something that Perth did so well across the weekend.
Yeah.
And this is obviously a specialty of yours when you're out on the floor. How important do you think it is in terms of leaving the opposition deflated? You come up with half a stop, basically. You force a missed shot, and then you should complete the stop, and you can't, and there's a second chance, sometimes a third chance for the opposition. How tough is that when you're giving those up as an opposition?
Well, I think there's so many different things. From one, it's so deflating. You have a great possession. I even saw it against South East. They went with this junk up zone, and then you shoot up a shot, and then they just go to an O-board possession.
Yeah, was grabbing a few of those.
And then, or they kick it out to another three. And so, from that, it's just deflating. You play a quality possession for 22, 23 seconds, and then that happens. The other side, and this is what I think why Nick was really good, is he went back to straight away in Sydney. I think he had 4 O-boards in the first quarter, a couple and ones, and it gets you in the game, especially like a guy like him where the offense isn't really generally run from. I'm talking about set plays. He was feasting off that, and so from a confidence thing, it gets. When I got on the game, I didn't know where my shots were coming from, but I knew if I could get an O board or two, as soon as I got in, I was wide into the game, and I knew I was going to have an influence. And so, I think that really helped. And even from that standpoint, I think from the game, looking at Dario, whilst I think both him and Majock are lacking a little bit of confidence right now, one thing you have to respect is that they were still very tenacious on the O glass and just still rewarding themselves and getting those second opportunities. And that's a huge thing for Wildcats. For us, we always wanted to get points from turnovers and provide more opportunities and the O boards, and that helps. And I think it just you want to do that. It's nothing like it makes an opposition guard another 14 seconds, and and relying on that. So I think South East did a really poor job actually of whilst they were getting missed shots. I thought you giving them wide open looks like O boards, and you're talking about great late quotes. I thought Will Weaver. Guys know their role. When Bryce Tarico get the ball or someone, they're going to shoot it. You get a running head start, and some of those guys are the best rebounders in their position. I've been doing it for some time. I thought Jesse in the fourth quarter would have had 3 or 4 looks where he just tapped it out. Those things are gut punches when you're trying to get back into the game.
Yeah, still love seeing Jesse in the fourth quarter. Still
that's his role.
Just knows how to do it. Basketball IQ so strong. Talk to me about Cairns. A Thursday night matchup for the Wildcats.
Interesting.
Really fresh in the memory, tossing away that 10-point lead at three-quarter time there only a couple of weeks ago. The Taipans have really become this sort of sexy pick all of a sudden for crashing into the top 4. What have you made of what they've put together? So to me, what stands out, or one of the things that stands out, is the value of having an import who knows the league, and we saw that from DJ Newbill.
Yeah, he's been sensational
against Sydney on Sunday. And then you throw in 2 guys who are new in Scott Machado and Cam Oliver, who have both had big games at different times, and then plenty of improvement from guys like Noy. What have you made of them under Mike Kelly, and do you think they're likely to be that 4th team that makes the playoffs, assuming you've got Perth, Sydney and Melbourne in there as well?
I mean, out of the last, I think they're 6-1 or 5-1 in the last.
So they're top.
So they're rolling. I think you can't go by the quality of Machado, and I think I spoke about this with Cam on Sunday. You've got a guy generally you get a scoring point guard all the time, across the league, but I think he just complements them real well because he's distributing unreal, such a good IQ, and even little things that people don't even look at. I think in the fourth quarter they double teamed him and he had nowhere, and he just did a off the dribble left hand cross court pass to Newbill to save it and not a turnover, and you just can't that's a legit point guard. And I was even thinking, if I was Cairns and you're talking about budgeting, I'd say to the NBL, hey, we want to get this guy and lock him in for 3 years because everyone would want him. He's an unbelievable player. Like he's one of my favourite players to watch.
You don't want him to end up like Melo Trimble, where he's there for one season and then he goes to a bigger market.
Exactly. So I think, and that's when you're talking about those three imports have been very consistent. Both Oliver and Nooble have shown, and Oliver's shooting really well for his size, and Nooble's taken over games. And I think, Neuer was good, and then even on Sunday, like Mirko Juric came in and had, I think, 8 points in the first quarter. So what Mike's done really well is he's just completely trimmed his rotations. Like from the start of the year where he was playing 10, 11 guys, it's just not, you can't do it in a 40-minute game, and there's no need. And so, I think he's brought in Fabian
Krislovic.
Yep. And he's just done a solid role. And and if they're rolling with Nate, they roll with him and give him the ball. But his minutes have obviously just sort of, they're all over, a bit erratic at the moment, and that's fine. It's not like, all right, we need to give him the ball, and unfortunate. But and then obviously JK does a really good job off the bench and just plays that sort of facilitator role. And you're right, they're a sexy pick at the moment, I think, just because of the regional teams, and you're looking at it. No one's put up their hand in that fourth spot and said, hey, I want to run with it. And right now they're playing, and they've beaten Melbourne, Sydney and Perth, like of all clubs, and to think they've lost, what are they, 0-3 against Illawarra?
Yes, they are.
You change that around. Like they're
probably
firmly,
second,
and it's crazy. Like they're on the bottom. So, I mean, it happens and it goes on, but I think it's good. I mean, you see them, they start 0-12 last year. Again, a lot of question marks whether they would be good, remote team, like all that sort of stuff. For them to be successful, I think is always good for the league. And I hope there's a point where it goes, like you don't see that case of Melo Trimble, 2.0 where Machado goes, yep, sweet, this is a stepping stone, I'm going to go. Like I'd be, when you're talking about equality and across the league, like that's where something, I'd love to see the league say, hey, what does it cost for him to stay? Like he's going to be a guy that could be legit and is making your team successful.
Yeah.
Because, like as much as, all right, it's cool, Tremble was good, they didn't have results last year, and now they're sitting fourth. Who would have thought, like people had, bookmarked them as a bottom team. So, it's good for that. And I think if there was, I looked, and the Wildcats are underdogs, which was super surprising.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, look, I think Wildcats will want to make a statement. I mean, they would have looked at that and said, missed opportunity there, and they want to continue playing better. It's getting around that Christmas mark where they, Hopman Cup, or no, change, but all that sort of the schedule. They want to be setting themselves up. You don't want to be looking at the back end of the season and going, and now they're in the conversation at first place, but if we're second or third, you don't want to be going, these are the games that we dropped and they'll hurt us in the long run.
Yeah. Have you spoken to Jarrod Kenny about his hair?
It's the worst.
Are you a consultant there at all? Or no?
Of course not. I mean, I've had some horrible haircuts in my time, so I can't be the one to speak. But he stayed with us from Tuesday. Last time he was here, he was here for the whole week. And like I brought up, when he was in New Zealand League last year, I literally was like, is this a gag? Like, someone paid you some money to keep it? And now it's obviously just become this thing on their own. But there's a lot of, it always goes in different styles. Like you've obviously got Mitch Creek's faux hawk thing, whatever that's going on, and obviously he's his own brand. But I guess that to him, he said that's a really popular haircut in New Zealand, and I was like, yeah, but we're not in New Zealand, and even in North Queensland, which maybe resembles New Zealand, it's not even a popular haircut. So I'm not sure what's going on.
Is it here for the long haul?
Yeah, I really don't know. He's a weird cat, JK. There's some things like that where, he's one of the most genuine human beings, one of the nicest blokes going around, but then there's some things like that he'll stay strong on.
Okay.
But it's all right. Next time, I think they only came to Perth 1 year, so I'll shave it off if I have to, because it's actually getting some real thickness.
You could have just got rid of it in the middle of the night when it was at yours, and then just blamed it on one of your kids. Sorry, the scissors got in the wrong hands.
Imagine that.
That opportunity's passed you by. Mate, let's get into a couple of the Twitter questions, because we've got some good ones. The first one's from Tim Renderlick. Biggest trash talkers ever encountered by Greg, A, for the Wildcats, so teammates of yours, and B, opposition team / player. What sort of light can you shed here? Yeah,
when teams, and I was thinking this when I received, I was like, that's a good one. And team, I would have had, there's 3, and they've all been imports. And so James Ennis was one. He would just, in a way, a subtle way, but he would let you know that that he was on a very high pedestal, and you were at the bottom of that.
Okay.
But he
then proceeded to back it up in some sort of
exactly
style.
right. So you would, for like an hour and a half, you thought you had like a really good training session, and you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm actually not doing too bad here. And then for 5 minutes, he decided to turn it on, and then like actually make you feel like you're an under 12 kid, like can't even go halfway, and you're like, wow, he's really, really good. And then let you know as well.
Yeah, one of the early training sessions, I think this is before you guys had played your first actual game with Ennis in the lineup. He hit a 3 at training and then did the 3 fingers running back down the floor, and this is during a scrimmage. I thought, this guy's going to be bringing some competitive fire.
Yeah, he was like that, and then I think it was pretty funny because obviously now, like when he was here, he obviously had an expectation that he was going back to the NBA. Like he wasn't going to stay for the long run, and he was playing really, really well. And then once they had told him, oh no, you're staying, like there was a deadline, the Wildcats had put in a contract, you have to stay here. Like for a month, he was like one of the worst people to be around because he just sort of was like, oh, what am I doing here? Sure. You know, like I'm a lot better than the league. But so that was those moments where like for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, he wouldn't even talk.
Okay.
And then like you'd be at training and it's like he couldn't even be bothered to be there. And then he'd be like, well, you think you have the wood over him, and then he would put you back in your place, and then he'd be like already in game time. And so he was a different cat. Like, I mean, I love him and good to talk to him still. And
I love that he still has a love for the Wildcats.
Oh, yeah, it was
I love
awesome.
that he's not forgotten where he's come from in that regard.
It is good. And then you go 2 and 3, Ernest Ross.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
And I just went to Manila with him for the 3-on-3 tournament like a few months ago, and he didn't change. Like he's matured.
Guam's finest.
He's matured a hell of a lot. And credit to him, he's a great bloke.
Yeah.
But God, did he talk some smack like in that. And I'm talking like
when this is on the training court to you guys or on the floor
both.
In games or both?
Okay, yeah. So like training, it was like, so great story here. We literally, when we signed Ernest Ross and it all happened, we're like, oh, okay, we brought him in, and someone put up a photo of him at the airport, and he was wearing a tight white Bond singlet, but it was tight because it was like a 4X and like sweatpants and he looked overweight, and I've joked around with him all the time, and he was like, we're like, oh, he must have eaten Ernest Ross on the way here. Like, and usually they lose height, but he had gained 20 kgs. And so we were in the office and we were joking around with the assistant coaches. We're like, mate, you guys signed this like guy that was supposed to be like the business. And then like, so Trev was obviously in his office and he was like, let me look at this photo. And he was like, what is going on? So the next day we trained, and it was the worst training session for us because Trev was like, all right, I'll get him in shape then. And so like we would be doing suicides, get it done in whatever time, not even a suicide, but you get it done in, can't remember what it is, 30 seconds or 32. Mm-hmm. And Ernest was like, as we're done, he's like 3/4 back. And so Trev would just be like, all right, last person to get done has to do it again. Obviously Ernest was like never going to be close to winning. Sure. So it was brutal. So he, I remember. But the thing was, he came out of so much shape. But then, like the next day, he would rock up talking smack, or he would score on someone or a charge, and he would be like talking so much crap. And we're like, you are really struggling. I don't understand why you're talking so much. So that happened like even just in games. And
sure.
It was funny, like, he obviously flexes muscles, all that sort of stuff. And it was funny, like, 3 years later, he like rocks up in the SBO. I'm like, how the hell did he get back here? Like, but he completely changed his demeanour. He's got like a young child. I was talking about in Manila and all that sort of stuff. But
great.
At that time, he was talking a lot of smack. We obviously had DeAndre Daniels, and those two were boys. And obviously DeAndre was a little bit higher up, so they would just go back and forward, Ernest. And then our last one was JP Tokoto, and he was on another level, and that was just not a good thing because
you could see that one. That one was probably more obvious to people watching the games. You could see that one.
And that was just similar, but just it was a tough thing. And I think there was obviously when we had issues throughout the whole season that year, but he didn't mind. And I mean, he would have tried to start about 6 fights during the season, like with opposition. Like every single time, like at half time, he'll be chirping. Like he'd be, if he was playing good as you're walking in the tunnel.
That's dangerous when you're walking into the same tunnel.
And it would always happen every single time. And I would always be like, the first time I was like, all right, what's going on here? And he'd be piping away at an opposition as you walk into the locker room, and you've got 10 guys in a close proximity and no one's around.
Yeah.
And so everyone's just like, it's just going. So the first 2 or 3 times I'm like, all right. And then by that time, as we start losing games and he wasn't changing the way he was acting, I was like, you can do whatever you want, mate. I'm not if you want to be an idiot, you can be an idiot. So there was those 3 easily. In terms of guys that would have opposition, it's funny. It's as I played longer, you lost that trash talking. So the 2 guys that I always remember was CJ Bruden and Kevin Braswell, and they sort of just let you know when they got a bucket on you. And I
feel like CJ would have had some great games.
Yeah. They sort of went, but there was nothing, like, even when I looked at it, there was no one that sort of stood out and said, like, guys, by that time you play in a league of so many guys, and so you sort of like, generally I would match up on an import, so they're generally quiet.
Okay.
And like the thing is, I didn't really get trash talking, because if they scored on me and they would like actually pipe in at something, I just sort of was like, yeah, you're really good. What am I supposed to do?
That's just your response.
Yeah.
I acknowledge that.
So they used
to
hate it, like, because I wouldn't give them anything, So
was the Gold Coast Blaze before they went under? Were they had when they had James Harvey?
Yeah, that was my one season,
so
I didn't really have. Yeah, so like they had Ian Day Ubaka as well. So yeah, they were. Yeah, of all teams, like they would pipe in. Like Gary Irvin talked a lot of smack.
Oh, Gary Irvin,
yeah. Randall and Sobey, like they used to go like at Adelaide. So I think it's when there's a resounding theme. They play Joey, and so he gets him.
Joey does empower.
Yeah, no, and he gets him playing hard. So no, it was those ones. But I think if I was like CJ, and I think if you didn't say CJ, he'd be upset. He didn't say that he was the best trash talker.
The pedigree though, like to come from Cow, who's just such a smooth talker, there would have to be an element of that would cross over to you in terms of the way that you're able to talk, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely saw that with CJ. He probably didn't have too much to say when Sean Reddish blocked his shot in the last ever second played at Challenge Stadium.
Like the best, if that goes down, as maybe the top 3 Wildcat moments. If only it was like to win a championship. Because then we went and lost.
The bad footnote is that you guys lost
the next
days after. But as far as just signing off at Challenge Stadium,
ridiculous.
CJ goes clear
Sean's
out.
Reaction.
Let me get to the bucket. Sean just almost knocked a hand off that kid's hand. The high five.
It'd be awesome to talk to that kid now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what, 7 years or 6 years maybe? Like,
he's had numerous hand surgeries to try and get
the first
his
to have
wrist a
robotic implant. He's still got an imprint of Sean's hand.
That's a great moment. This one from Steve Dalby. We might have to make this our last because we're running out of time. We had a lot of Twitter questions this week, so we'll definitely get to those in the weeks to follow if we don't get them today. This one from Steve Dalby about the New Zealand Breakers. The Breakers seem to be concerned with Glenn Rice Jr.'s welfare. So obviously this is the import who was released for the third and final time just about yesterday. Do NBL clubs generally have strategies for aiding players to deal with off-court issues? Now this is obviously a difficult one because it was before the courts and he had a history coming in. How did you sort of see New Zealand dealing with this circumstance, and how testing is that for a club to balance we need you on the floor versus we can't put up with that behaviour? Yeah,
for sure. And I think, look, I think Matt Walsh actually, in a way, it's funny, like I thought he handled it well once the indiscretion was made in terms of the assault charge or whatever it may be, and saying we've got to do a responsibility to take care of him, which I was like, actually, well done. Like that is the case. Like there's the stake of it as well. The stake of it is, one, if you're an individual that requires help, you can only be helped if you want to be helped. So this last sort of thing is like, geez, I mean, like you've been given enough chances.
Breach,
But the thing is that's where I even look at it and go, like, why do they bring him in for that Cairns game? Like sometimes results don't matter. Like, look after him and do all that sort of stuff, but to bring in for one game for the sake of it, when you've been talking about him, how he needs help and all this sort of stuff, like what has been done, like what are the methods in place, like put him there and go. Like, at the end of the day, like sometimes what transpires on the court is irrespective of what's going on off the court. And so answering that sort of question regarding well-being and taking care of, look, I'd only be on knowledge of what the Wildcats do, and obviously they do place an emphasis. But I've said this all the time. I think even the Wildcats and the National Basketball League don't place enough emphasis in terms of that, and even the well-being. I think we place too much priority on results and wins and losses. I think we still do a really poor job from a league standpoint of going, if someone's struggling from a mental health condition or something's going on, take care of that, and because it might, it's going to detract away from if we're winning games or not. So, and why I say that is, look, we've got a sports psychologist, but are they full time at the club? No, it's just a sake of like if you have an issue, go up. Like Katie Reid does an unbelievable job for the organisation, but is she trained to monitor the well-being of all players? I don't think so. I could be wrong, but that's not her job anyway. And so, what I'm saying is, you look at Cricket Australia, the Players Association fund to have a player development manager, but who places a huge importance on well-being. I mean, when I was transitioning jobs, the WACA asked me to apply, to do an interview for that well-being manager gig, and the Western Force have asked me to do some consultation in terms of doing that sort of stuff to place an importance. And I don't think the Wildcats, and much to my knowledge, it could have changed, are doing that, and that's easy. Like, they can go down the track, the track, and there's obviously a responsibility of a lot of things. That's why when I was, I guess, part of the team, I would make sure guys' well-being was taken care of, and to do that. But so when you're saying that, the Wildcats are quite highly resourced. So I would argue for the fact that that's happening.
Some of the small market teams.
Yeah, look at Illawarra. I mean, Nick Kay and all those guys, and that's obviously changed. But a few years ago, they had one massage all season, and that was because Nick gave away his tickets. So I don't think, and that comes from a Players Association. The Cricket Australia pay for that. So, yeah, it's interesting. I always say this, there's been, for the last 10 years, I know of instances and stories and all that sort of stuff that have happened, and if we were as high profile as AFL or NRL over East, those stories would come about, people struggling with mental health issues, or anything that happens with drugs and alcohol. I'm not saying that's prevalent in our league, but there has been stuff that's happened, and it's just because, not like it's been swept under the rug, but we just weren't in a position to be able to, be resourced enough to take care of it. And the other side is, there wasn't really a real priority on transition of athletes. I think we do a poor job, in terms of that, looking after the alumni and all that sort of stuff. I'm not talking about your stars. They're taken care of. People go into media or they're still being involved. I'm talking about development players or guys that were sitting at 8, 9, 10, 11 spots. Yeah. Perfect example, who was at Brisbane a couple of years ago, but a guy that's getting 40 to 46,000 now, but in the past was only on 42,000. That was going to 4 different clubs in 5 seasons and had to uproot all of his stuff, was really on a minimal job, and then doesn't get his gig, and for 4 years obviously didn't do an education, because the only thing he was really thinking about was, I need to crack the rotation, I need to play, this is my life. What happens when they're done? What really goes on? They play NBL 1 and they've been done.
This is a problem around the world, right?
Correct. And that's the thing, and so there's all those external pressures and all that sort of stuff as well, and so it is interesting. And I think obviously now we're placing a little bit more importance on it, and we're getting more resourced. I know the Player Association did a really good job in placing importance on well-being, funding a player welfare manager, but realistically you need someone there all the time. The biggest thing of why a player or an individual won't speak up is because they don't have trust, or and so you're not going to just do that to say guy that's over East until they establish that trust. So the AFL NBL does it really well, but look at them, they're multi-million-dollar business, and so I think that's where obviously the NBL are moving towards, and I don't think it's just the NBL. I think every other sporting code, I think you've got issues.
Get better in that space. Yeah, good to see on that note as well. Adelaide with the Beyond Blue,
unreal.
Beyond Blue game coming up
with South East Melbourne. So I reached out to Joey and I guess acknowledge great how important that is. I mean, they might see it's a mental health round, but for me, it's one spectator, one fan, one member, seeing that they're placing an importance of mental health and maybe taking the courage of saying, you know what, I might go seek help or speak to Beyond Blue and get those resources. So I think any time you can put onus and power behind an important message is pretty good, and good to see. It's obviously done in the AFL quite a lot, but to see Adelaide take sort of that priority on mental health it was pretty cool.
Terrific, mate. Let's get into the crystal ball before we get out of here. So last week,
should I just echo mine from last week?
You're just going to double down on the input. Think about it. I wanted a tech foul in the Sydney-Perth game, which never happened. The fact that thing got blown out so early kind of took a bit of spice out of the game. I'm going to turn this week's crystal ball into a crystal LaMelo ball.
Oh,
see what I did there?
He's done.
His name's LaMelo Ball. We won't see him again in this league. And this is, I sort of came up with this yesterday, and then the past 24 hours has sort of been all over Twitter with people agreeing with me. I just don't think we're going to see him. If he's out for a month, his stock has never been higher. He's coming off 2 straight triple-doubles. He doesn't particularly want Illawarra's whatever they're going to be record at the end of the season on his resume if they finish at 6-22 or whatever they're going to finish at. I think he's done what he's come here to do, and I don't think we're going to see him back, and that's
I think I can, if there's a crystal ball, that's one, as well as an import getting sacked, but no, he's it's
a shame for the league though, because he has drawn people, and massive. You heard the cheers for him even in opposition gyms.
And the Sydney game was crazy. Him like more oohs and ahs than Sydney going that. It's going to be such an interesting outcome of that, because I look at it and that go, he was an 18-year-old kid, and I think the first triple-double was obviously, and I'm not taking away from the triple-double at all, but the first one was ridiculous numbers, and you look at that and go, wow, 18-year-old kid, look how much he's grown, and then obviously it backs it up. Wasn't an efficient triple-double, and they're losing games.
But chase that second one a little bit.
Of course. I mean, and that's the thing, I think, even from him, he goes, What world does anyone think that him winning an NBL championship is going to be great for him? The goals are a lot bigger. For him, number one draft pick or top 3 is what his goals are. He's not going 10 years' time when he's playing for hopefully the Knicks or whatever. He's going, you know what? I finished top 4 for Illawarra. At that point, he goes, you know what? Me backing up and getting triple doubles and getting that is more important than wins or losses. That's the case. And so, what's going to be interesting is what happens. If he's done for the league, and fair enough. If he comes back, awesome. That's really good for the league. But if he's done, and he goes top 3. How does he play in the NBA? And so if he has this really good year in the NBA and his career really flourishes, people are like, the NBL is just a legitimate league and it's providing pathways, but it's good competition, If he has a dud and he falls flat on his face, and then they're like, well, how did this 18-year-old kid come over here, and tear it up, put up triple doubles first time in 40-minute history, but then can't even go there in the best league. It's going to be really interesting sort of thing. Even just like RJ Hampton, and you look at all those previous ones. Terrence Ferguson didn't have that crash hot of a year, and you're like, he's good, but he's a project player, and he is a draft pick 22, and is just a solid role player. Like Torrey Craig didn't dominate the league, but he's a great role player. James Ennis dominated the league, but it's 7 years, and same. Brian Bowen wasn't dominant, but two-way. It's going to be interesting how that is perceived. So, my crystal ball, I'm going to say Wildcats will win this one, and Sydney will be on a slide and lose. So they will lose to Melbourne. So that's a 3-game slide.
Yeah, so I think that's in Melbourne, that one.
Yeah. So I reckon that. So they just closed the gap. It's just a really boring crystal ball, but I just want to predict this.
What did you make of 2 of your former teammates in Kevin Lish, who will definitely be better for the run coming back in his first weekend, but also Casey Prather, who showed some really good moments.
And Casey was massive, and I think that is the case. And look, I think Melbourne, they just smashed Adelaide and they got on top of them. I think, you can't Chris Goulding's really matured, I think, as a player. Like, where I never thought he was a selfish guy, but he's actually playing for getting guys involved and stuff. I thought he was really good. But Casey was huge, and I think more his aggressiveness. I mean, his shot's always been that mid 30s or whatever that. But to see him transitioning and getting and he had a nice dunk at the
with
end.
That sort of bounce, he takes the Euro and
that's
bouncy.
where he was really like. That's what when I saw that I was like, good. That's what you needed, a little bit of confidence. It was a perfect game for him. Even at the end, it was a bit of a blowout, and they sort of gave him these avenues and opportunities to do something, and he really took ownership of it. So, yeah, good for him. I think Kev, he just showed that sort of rustiness and stuff like that. He just missed shots that generally he goes, but it'll be interesting. I mean, he's had a few injuries the last few years and all that sort of stuff. What role they put him in. Like, obviously, they've completely changed. Before, when 2-3 years ago, he was the main guy, and now you've got, Didi Lazada, Casper Ware. Like, does he become this primary defender where that's his focus and he just becomes this hit three guy, or is he still a playmaker? And so, he showed that rust, and it showed. Like, even, they've been playing, they haven't had too many injuries. I think even missing Moller, just a guy that focuses on defense and having that length and the O boards and all that sort of stuff will help him out. But Kev will obviously come back, there's no doubt. But sort of you see that because he's one of the better guys going around, and I saw him miss a couple of shots, and I was like, I just hope one just drops for him, just so your confidence comes up. So it'll be good. Okay,
well, we'll continue to watch that space, and obviously watch your import movement space as well, mates. We'll let you get out of here. Thanks again for your time.
Appreciate it.
To our listeners, thanks again for your time, and we'll chat to you next week.
The Dribble Podcast is brought to you by PerthNow, your home of sporting action from home and abroad.